Eleanor Williams's claims that she'd been trafficked by an Asian grooming gang led to protests, racist attacks, and claims of a cover-up. Eventually, she was jailed for lying.
I don't want to be that girl that cries rape. I'm not that person.
I'm Sky News' Jason Farrell, and in Unreliable Witness, we ask, why did she lie? And explore unanswered questions with new revelations. Follow Unreliable Witness wherever you get your podcasts.
Hello and welcome to the first Electoral Dysfunction Answer the Question special. It's like a quiz show, I love it. With me, Beth Rigby.
Me, Jess Phillips.
And me, Ruth Davidson.
We've called it Answer the Question because we're always getting messages saying politicians aren't very good at answering questions. Now, I've got a couple of politicians here who promised to buck the trend. And we're doing this special because we're getting so many questions. Thank you so much. Keep them coming. So email us at electoraldysfunction@sky.uk, and on WhatsApp we're on 07934 200 444. I'll take any voice note any time of the day, although I do turn my phone on silent at night. Now, Ruth and Jess are both here, so let's go straight in. Let's kick off with this email from Ellen. She's 17 and she says she's getting loads of posts from Labour on her Instagram feed. She reckons that she got 14 the other day. I mean, that's more press releases than I get in a day. That's just not right. Anyway, Ellen's question is this. How will parties make the most of social media during the election campaign? Jess?
I mean, all I'm going to say to this lovely young woman is she's clearly clicked on something and the algorithm is now overloading her with Labour Party materials. Tell her to log on to the Conservative website and maybe she'll get some of theirs as well, if she wants a bit of balance. I mean, most national election campaigning now happens basically online, whereas, you know, your local campaigns are still your absolute bread and butter, knocking doors, doing leaflets and all that sort of jazz. But it's also it's sort of micro-siting as well. So you go like loads of politics, like pavement politics, happens on these sort of Facebook neighbourhood sites. So, you know, political parties spend quite a lot of time going into these groups and talking to people. So you do actually have to have manpower as well as just sort of AI targeting that goes on. But I think this will be the first election where the air war is considerably greater than the ground war, and loads of money will be spent on it. And it is also the first election where we really, really need to watch that. Really watch disinformation, watch where stuff is coming from. Because actually, you might think you're getting Labour Party stuff, but it might not be. Like, I would just implore everybody to check before they repeat things, including politicians.
But I think Jess is right. This will be the first time in a general election, probably, that nobody really cares whether they're endorsed by the editorial of a particular newspaper or not, because it doesn't matter anymore. Or if they do care, it's for appearance's sake as much as anything else, in terms of the actual ability for print news to be able to shift a huge core of the electorate, because it doesn't work like that. And I think, personally, I find the kind of really cool down with the kids, like trying to be super funny and edgy and the stuff that you put out online, cringy AF, like really, really bad. And both parties do it. I mean, I think the Tory party's probably more cringy than the Labour Party, but then I would think that because they're my tribe.
Your own parents are always more embarrassing.
Exactly. Yeah. Like, your own parents are so much more embarrassing than your friends' parents. Yeah. But I think the holy grail is to have people to share stuff peer-to-peer, because you can micro-mosaic, so take people of certain ages or where they live in the country or their educational model or like all the data that you've got and try and micro-target these people online as best you can. But the absolute thing that you really want is to have something that catches fire and people share it organically between each other. That works so much better in terms of getting a message out there than the centre sending it out to kind of spokes at the end of a computer terminal. So that's why they try and do it, to be a bit like, ooh, and a bit, But honestly, some of it just misses so badly.
And also, like, we talk about air war versus ground war. I mean, air war is literally like the airwaves, and then the ground war is obviously what you're doing on the ground and knocking doors and all of that. In November 2023, the government used a statutory instrument, it's called, to basically increase spending limits for political parties in general elections. So Ellen, you've now got up to about £34 million each party can spend. That's up from about 19 million in 2019. The reason I'm telling you that is if you think you're getting a lot of digital stuff now, it's going to be absolutely mega, because this is the way that parties can target, and then they can section and drill down, and they can send certain messaging to certain people because they've done all the algorithms about what you're interested in and not. So you're going to get a lot more of it. Let's do a voice note next, and this is from Neil.
I've voted for Labour, Lib Dems and Tories throughout my time. But I could never align myself to one particular party because I never agree with absolutely everything they do. So I wanted to know, how do you cope or deal with collective responsibility? So when you're in the lobby and you're instructed to go through a certain lobby, there must be times when you don't actually necessarily 100% agree with what you're voting for. How do you deal with that?
Okay, so Neil's question is, how good are you at towing the party line? How hard can that be? Now, Jess is laughing next to me. Ruth is also laughing. The reason that these two women are on this podcast is precisely because they don't tow the party line. But it's a good question because so many politicians do. And if you want to climb the greasy pole of politics, you have to toe the party line sometimes. Yep. And you have to it's called patronage. And the more you do it, the more favour you are in with the top of the party. But come on, Jess, how good are you at towing the party line? And how hard can that be?
I think that one thing I'd like to just draw back the curtain and say that in 90% of the votes that I vote in Parliament, I have literally no strong feelings one way or another about them. And that might sound crass and callous, but I would ask dear caller to really look inside his heart and see how much does he care about the regulation of, disposable barbecues. So there's a lot of things I have to vote on where I am utterly delighted that somebody who is a bit like me and has the same basic broad brush ideology as me, who knows way more about each individual thing, has basically told me what to think about it. So I'm absolutely fine with voting for the whip in most cases. And on the things I know about and that I care about, I work incredibly hard behind the scenes to make it so that the Labour Party's position is the one that I don't feel I have to rebel from. And in all my time, that has only actually come up 3 times where I voted against the party whip, even in a time when I was really, really not getting on with the Labour Party. But everybody has a red line, and your red line is usually, it'll be either something you feel very, very deeply strongly that you know more about and can't abide what your party is saying. And then sometimes it is just to have to try and topple the leader of your party. That definitely happens at the moment, certainly in the Conservatives. So it's actually, do you know what? Collective responsibility matters. If you want governance to actually happen, nobody in any workplace anywhere in the country agrees with absolutely everything that their company does. And I don't agree with the Labour Party always either. But you've got to pick your battles. Otherwise, you just look like a massive moaner and stropper. And also, it won't hit home when you actually do it.
Jess, how often does this happen that people in the party have a quick word with you, a little quiet word about something you said or done?
Almost never, because I am a lost cause. So even when I was on the shadow front bench for the Labour Party, I was given an enormous amount of latitude. I think only once ever has somebody been like, can you take that tweet down? You've gone too far. Once. Whereas lots of other people live by much more rigorous rules than I ever lived by.
Okay. So you're a bit of an exception to the rules sometimes, maybe.
I think they thought I was ungovernable at times.
You are quite ungovernable, but we love you for it.
It's part of your charm.
What about you, Ruth? How many times have you been pulled aside and have a word with you, or no?
Yeah, I mean, again, a little bit like Jess, although I had a slightly different route. So I maybe only wasn't the leader for about, half a dozen votes. And then once you're the leader, you can basically make the party policy what you believe. I mean, you do have to make sure that you try and accommodate as much of your tribe as you can, or as many of your parliamentary colleagues as you can. There were times where I had to either choose to defend or create some clear blue water between what colleagues down south were doing on either reserved or devolved issues. And then, because I went from Holyrood's, when I left there, I went to the Lords. Like, I have no wish to be a minister. I'm not trying to get promoted. I don't want to spend more of my time in London and away from my child. Thank you very much. There's no carrot that they can give me to behave. And because you're not on a ballot paper anymore, there's no stick that they can beat me with. So again, a bit like Jess, ungovernable.
Ungovernable. Hey, but Jess, Ruth just said, like, when you get to be the leader, you set the policies, so you don't.
What are you suggesting? I should become the leader of the
yeah,
Labour Party?
Yeah, one day you could become the leader of the Labour Party, and then they.
I would govern with an iron fist.
And you'd like the trappings, because you with your walk-in wardrobe and your carriage driveway, you'd be having chauffeur-driven everything.
It.
You'd have a chauffeur-driven plane. You'd be in a helicopter every week. You'd be, you know, because you've got, what was it that your granny always told you? Bread is not enough. You've got to also have roses.
Indeed. But the truth is that I wouldn't mind being the Prime Minister, but governing a political party is the worst gig.
Yeah.
Governing a political party, I mean, is way, 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 way more tedious than governing a country.
Yes, corralling others. Because actually, there's so much scrutiny on what you do and say and what you do in Parliament and the positions that you take and all the rest of it. You kind of have limited capacity or tolerance for people who kind of stray or say stupid things or are in some council chamber somewhere and say something racist or ageist or something. Do you know, like there's that element of like, you want to stamp your foot and it's like, this would be fine if all I had to do was my job and not everybody bloody else's. Yeah. So yeah, but it's good to know that I'm not triggered by that in any way and it didn't all just come flooding back.
Neil, and also I would like to say that I always toe the party line at work, and I'm sure all my colleagues would vouch for me that I am utterly governable. Now, this email's from Jonathan, who wants to talk to us about political conversations around the trans debate. Jonathan says, it seems that our political leaders often inflame rather than help a very volatile situation. Robert emailed in too, saying that they thought we'd duck this sort of question, but Robert wishes Labour in particular had a clearer position on all of this. So look, let's take it back. Can politicians do better on the trans debate? I'll start with you, Jess.
Oh, undoubtedly politics rather than necessarily, I mean, there's lots of individual politicians who've not done a good job. But politics itself, it's a challenging debate where there are competing rights issues, and it deserved way, way better than it got. And actually, I think that the sort of culture war element of it sort of took over as a sort of delicious division. And I have to say, I think that the issue of trans rights versus women's rights, absolutely politics should be able to have a really decent and reasonable conversation. It deserved it not being, first of all, silenced, as if you shouldn't be able to talk about it. And secondly, it deserved much more calm class across the board.
Robert says that they wish Labour in particular had a clearer position on all of this. Labour has shifted its position. What is Labour's position, and are you happy with it?
Yeah, I'm fine with the Labour Party's position on this. The Labour Party's position is that women's only spaces have to be protected and that the Equality Act has to stand on the basis of sex, but that can't necessarily leave the trans issue where it is because things have massively progressed. And so looking at policy that would make the lives of trans people better is undoubtedly important.
Because Corbyn had a pledge to introduce a self-identification system.
Yeah.
And that was in the party's 2019 manifesto. And now Labour has abandoned support for self-identification and says instead it would work to back a more streamlined system for obtaining a medical diagnosis of gender dysmorphia, which is required for people to legally change their gender. And you think, Jess, that's the right place that they've got to?
Personally, I think that that's the right place. I was on the original inquiry into sort of discrimination against trans groups in the Commons. Actually, what trans people tell me when I speak to them is about issues of their healthcare and like the other discriminations that they face, like just trying to live their lives. And it's funny, like actually the vast majority of people in this space, whether it's the feminists on one side seeking to protect women's safety and also trans people seeking just to have a better life where they can access things on an equal footing. I think there is masses of common ground, but there needs to be a recognition that sometimes that clashes, and actually that clash, we put a man on the moon 20 years before I was born. I reckon we can get around this.
And Ruth, what's your view Can politicians do better?
Yeah, they can, absolutely. And actually, I think we all had a bit of a duty of care to do a bit better, because this has been one of those classic more heat than light debates. And I do think that when you've got people as far apart as Theresa May in the 2017 manifesto that was saying we needed to update the Gender Recognition Act, and Jeremy Corbyn in both 2017, I think, and 2019, talking about that. Now, it may not have been that we wanted to go to self-identification, but the Gender Recognition Act was out of date. I mean, I truly believe it was out of date. The idea that we couldn't have got some people in a room with sensible heads on to have a look at how we could progress this in a way that made things better and didn't frighten society and made sure that there were serious concerns about women's safety in women-only spaces were considered. It seems like a massive miss to me.
I do want to ask you this, Ruth, because you know what we're talking about, kind of the culture wars playing out into the election. I remember being at a party conference and the Prime Minister started talking about a man's a man and a woman's a woman. And the point being, they're really complicated issues and politicians keep boiling them down to these like culture war things. Do you think that is irresponsible?
Well, I think the point that you're making is the correct point, which is the very last person that should be making decisions of such a personal and vulnerable nature is a politician from a lectern trying to turn a soundbite on the nightly news. I mean, that's clearly a case where it's down to assessment from healthcare workers that know the case. And I'm not entirely sure that you can write blanket black and white rules for something that is so incredibly complex. And it's so difficult because politicians don't want to talk about this. And the reason they don't want to talk about this is because it is so easy to clip quite a nuanced position that's maybe a couple of paragraphs and boil it down to one sentence that's taken out of there that doesn't convey it. And then it gets spread, because it's so polarised, the debate, gets spread round whichever the side that feels that they have been wronged by what you've said. And therefore, it's also one of those issues that once people have decided you're on the opposite side from them, they won't listen to a single other thing you say. Even if that's something that they might agree with, they've decided that you as a person are anti one of the things that is a complete cultural shibboleth from them. And it's perfectly fair that this is something that they hold dear. But it really is inhibiting for politicians who don't want to say anything that can be taken out of the context that it's made. And I do think that it's almost impossible to walk back from the position we are. And we should have been much wiser, much earlier about how we started talking about this.
Okay, I think we're going to come back to this subject a lot in the run-up to the general election. Let's take a break. We'll cover a question about Prime Minister's questions in a minute and talk about the state of a cup of tea in the Commons. Okay, welcome back to our Answer the Question special. I'm actually loving this, by the way. We should do this every week. No, we could have 2 a week. We could do like a podcast and then another podcast. Everyone's just like, shut up, Beth, get on with it. Right, Joseph emailed about PMQs. He says, there are too many questions which can just be summed up as, are we the best party, Prime Minister? So, Joseph's question is, why does there seem to be so much time wasting and brown nosing, may I add, at PMQs? Jess?
Because it's literally that member of Parliament's opportunity to get a local press release out. So they say something like, don't we have the best pork pies in this area of the UK, Prime Minister? And the Prime Minister says, yes, surely we do. And I think, my God, imagine you had the opportunity to change something and you went for whether you had the best pork pies. I've literally heard someone make that claim on the regular since I was elected. Prime Minister's questions is not the time for scrutiny. It is there to bolster you and your side. It serves nothing for the country to find out anything interesting. The liaison committee, where the Prime Minister comes and is interviewed, is a way better forum. And in fact, select committees in Parliament is a way better forum for scrutiny because they don't answer the questions. What a load of old tosh it is.
It's almost like, Joseph, it is a bit of a pantomime. It's a sort of jousting between the two leaders. I think Labour actually do view it as an opportunity because when you're in opposition, it's hard even to get the mic. So it's an opportunity for Keir Starmer to be seen to be attacking whichever Conservative Prime Minister was in. He had particularly terse and I think quite an unpleasant relationship with Boris Johnson. I think they really disliked each other. But Ruth, what do you think about PMQs?
Well, I think the kind of the party leader part of it is the bit that people sort of tune in for. It's certainly the bit the broadcasters focus on, and it's the way in which somebody who is in opposition gets to punch a bruise. And it's very rarely used for anything other than punching a bruise. It's not really to elucidate or get answers or to highlight something or to find an area of common ground, and unless we send people to war, unless British troops are in combat, in which case it's used for that. And then COVID, we saw a bit of that, and then it got back to the kind of punch and judy. But the question about sort of why did backbenchers stand up and kiss arse, I don't know. Like, it's just, like, it makes your insides shrivel up. And I don't get it, because if I was a backbencher, it is so hard. I mean, Jess, you've been in since, when did you get elected?
2015.
So you've been in for 9 years. You probably go in the ballot more times than you don't. How many times have you been picked?
3.
Right, exactly. So 9 years, so you get picked once every 3 years, you get a chance to stand up and be on telly and clip it and shove it out in your social media and have all your, constituents see it. Like, ask something, even if you can't think of anything that's of massive importance, ask something about your constituency, not about the pork pies being the best out of this particular bakery, but ask something about when are we getting a new hospital, or, do something that you can use. Have currency, because the currency of doing that for the people who elect you will last a lot longer than kissing arse to, the Prime Minister and having the whips like you and pat you on the head and maybe becoming the junior minister for paper clips. It's actually the people who are craven. They don't get respect. Like, that's the thing. The people who are party leaders and in charge, we don't like the people that are kiss arses. We don't.
Also, just to be clear, the whips do give out those questions as well. Party whips will make people ask certain questions, so the Prime Minister will know what's coming.
There is one purpose to them. There is sometimes you can get asked, if there's not parliamentary time or you don't want to have a full debate on something, you can use it to raise an issue that you want to make a statement on. So you can make a statement in the House rather than make it to the media, so you can kind of keep yourself on the right side. But there is a question about why you're not allowing the opposition to be able to question you on the thing that you want to raise if you're the Prime Minister. So there's those kind of useful questions that can be asked, but that's a slightly different issue to the one that's
okay. Well, look, we're I'm sure we'll do more PMQs too. Send me any questions about it. I could talk about that all day. Now, we've got Policy Game. It's an email from Matt. It's part question, part game. What fun. Here is Matt's challenge. Ruth, what is the one thing you think Labour should put in their manifesto to make an impact? Jess, what is the one thing you think the Tories should put in their manifesto to make an impact?
Some actual commitment to some sort of social care reform, I think, would actually make a difference. It would be better than any tax cut that they're offering. I think some actual commitment that they were going to actually deal with the problem our country faces on social care, which has just been can-kicked forever, I would say would be, they would have my actual respect if they did that.
Social care, Ruth?
Well, I think the one thing that everybody should put in their manifesto is that they guarantee, if they become the lead party of government, is that they will give parliamentary time to another vote on assisted dying. And that's a non-party political issue. It is just about making sure that the debate is heard and that we're allowed to bring it forward, because the debate is so far ahead of where it was the last time it was asked. I think it's time that we take it to the country again.
And actually, the question to me from Matt is, Beth, can you decide which is the most feasible and realistic? When I'm confronted with those two policies, like actually tackling social care and putting that into a manifesto, and a question around moving on assisted dying and at least allowing a free vote in the Commons, the assisted dying one is absolutely the most realistic and feasible there, simply because on social care, as Jess and Ruth so well know, there have been commissions, attempts at cross-party consensus. Sorting out social care kind of transcends party politics. It requires consensus. It requires serious funding questions. I mean, Boris Johnson, to be fair to him, did announce an increase, didn't he, on national insurance to try and fund social care that got unravelled by Rishi Sunak. I think that social care absolutely needs to be dealt with. I'm afraid the nature of short-term politics and looking down the barrel of election means that I think it'll be a can kick down the road again, which I think is a shame. Right, the final question to Tony from Hexham. Tony from Hexham asks, on a scale of 1 being dog pee and 10 being superb, how would you rate a Houses of Parliament cup of tea in the canteen? I bet they don't use cheap tea bags. Ruth, come on, what's it like in the House of Lords fancy pants?
Yeah, do you know, I have a horrible admission to make, and you can insert your own joke here. I don't like the feeling of hot liquid in my mouth. So I've never drunk a full cup of coffee or a full cup of tea in my life. I'm trying desperately hard. Over the last year, I've tried to train myself to at least be able to hold down peppermint tea, because it's the least objectionable of all the teas. But yeah, no, I don't drink either tea or coffee.
It's a good job you're not standing for elected office, is all I can say, because that's a reason I wouldn't vote for somebody. You've broken the social code, in my view.
Do you know, when I'm on stuff like this, like I will actively put Diet Coke in a mug, so it looks like I'm holding either a tea or a coffee, so that it's like a mug.
This is true.
And when I go around people's houses, like you say, I was leader of the Tories in Scotland for like 8 years. The amount of sort of nice ladies who like wants to have you around their house to talk to you about stuff, and you have to turn down, or when you go to a local association and they want to feed you full of tea or coffee, like, God love our central office, they eventually told everybody that I'm just a Diet Coke fiend, and people would eventually just have Diet Cokes for me about 4 or 5 years in. But like, it's really embarrassing to have to admit that. Like, nobody doesn't drink
you
either
should be
tea
embarrassed.
or coffee.
I will answer the question.
Come on, tea in the Commons.
All tea in London is disgusting, because the water in London is literally revolting.
It's not revolting.
It is revolting. When I first came to London, and I was in touch with Thames Water about my water bill, I said, I'm not that keen on your water, when I was negotiating my bill and signing up for it. And she said, Madam, it's 97% pure. And I said, do not ever say that statistic again, because what I just heard was it's 3% shit. And I said, I'll only pay 97% of my bill. It is horrible. But the tea room in Parliament is the only good place in the entirety of London for a cup of tea.
Right, 1 is dog pee and 10 is superb. So 1 to 10?
6 out of 10 is what I would give a cup of tea in the House of Commons.
Oh, Ruth can't answer the question.
I can't answer the question.
It's like a Diet Coke.
The Diet Coke's very good out of the canteen.
I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10 because
your standards are lower.
My standards
but
are low.
You're not even going to the tea room. You're going to one of the other lesser.
So, Tony, the tea room is only for MPs, but you can walk up the staircase past the tea room, and then sometimes I walk up and have a little peer into the tea room to see who's chatting.
Let me tell you, behind that door is the best cup of tea you can get in Westminster.
And also the best gossip.
Oh yeah.
Thanks everyone for those brilliant questions. We love getting questions, so please send in some more. We'll try to pick some out on every episode. Email us at electoraldysfunction@sky.uk or WhatsApp voice note us on 07934 200 444. That's 07934 200 444. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.